We're going to talk about Iran. Iran is something that we all are very concerned about, and it's an issue that continues to bother us, bother the world. And you're aware, we're all aware, that we've seen sanctions on Iran. They have been quite severe, and they've affected the Iranian people as they did the Iraqi people when we've had imposed sanctions on Iraq. I mean, the sanctions are sanctions, and they cause suffering. That's the intention, of course. The elite don't get hit as badly as the ordinary people, and that's natural. The concept is that pressure gets put on the elite by the ordinary people. It doesn't necessarily work that way, as we've seen historically, but there we are. So now the sanctions tightened beyond goods and services and the like to oil, in so much as the President of the United States of America decided that he would no longer give the exemption that he had been given to nations like Japan in particular, because it imports a lot of Iranian oil, from the sanctions regime. So this bit hard, and of course the consequence was that, as you all know, that the head of the Revolutionary Guard issued a threat that were oil supplies to be completely cut off, then he would cut the Straits of Hormuz. Perhaps an unfortunate statement on his part, because it was perceived as very aggressive, and there we are. So, and then what happens? Then we have these tanker attacks on the 13th of June. Gosh, it's only a short while before, we haven't gone very, in a short space of time, we have moved here, haven't we? On the 13th of June at 6 a.m., these weren't the first tanker attacks, by the way. We had seen tanker attacks back in May, on May the 12th, but they were minor. On the 13th of June, there were severe attacks. At 6:12 a.m., a oil tanker bound for Japan sent out a distress signal, and at 7 a.m., an oil tanker bound for Taiwan sent out a distress signal on the 13th of June. These tankers were in the Gulf of Oman. They'd passed through the Straits of Hormuz, but they were in international waters now. The suggestion is that Iran attacked these tankers, and it's quite possible, or at least it's possible that elements of besiege, these small motor speedboats that are utilized by the besiege element of the Revolutionary Guard. The besieged are kind of independent, like a little independent militia, volunteer navy. They are known to be quite fiery, and it's possible that a couple of these guys got out of hand. The other possibility is that this was done by the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Israel, one of the other nations with a concern in the area. Unlikely to be Israel, of course, because Israel is very frightened of a war with Iran, given the possible consequences for them from Hezbollah missile attacks. Remember, in 2006, the entire population of northern Israel ran south when Hezbollah attacked with missiles, and it was a major disruption for Israel. Israel was not prepared for that, and Hezbollah remains a major force. So Israel has concerns about Lebanon and Hezbollah, and Lebanon's Hezbollah is, of course, allied to Iran. These, I'm telling you what's obvious here, but a third of the world's seaborne oil goes through the Straits of Hormuz. That's a major proportion. Now, for the Iran supreme leader, this brought back memories. His particular hatred of the United States of America is based on, and we've said this, but I'm just going over the ground here. You all know this. Based on an incident back in 1987. There had been a tanker war at that time, in Saddam Hussein's time, when Saddam Hussein was at war with Iran, or had been, previously at war with Iran, and in the aftermath of that, there were various incidents in that war. There were attacks by Iran on tankers bearing Iraqi oil, and in 1987, the Al-Ajah, an Iranian vessel, was accused of pushing mines into the Arabian Gulf on the day when Khomeini, the then president and now supreme leader of Iran, was about to address the United Nations in New York. And that undermined his speech, and he holds a grudge to this day about that. And it affects his attitude to America. So this is a sensitive issue in Iran. It's a sensitive issue in the world. And if Iranian Besieged did it, they were very unwise. Israel did it, impossible. If one of the GCC states did it, unlikely. But somebody did it, and it's extraordinary that this happened. President Trump of the United States, his members of the White House team spoke to Congress, suggesting that the 2001 law passed post 9/11, the AUMF law for the authorization for the use of military force, could be invoked in these circumstances. He suggested that there were links between Al-Qaeda and Iran, or sorry, not himself, but those that were speaking to Congressmen on behalf of the White House. That is a little tenuous, I have to say, because Al-Qaeda is the enemy, not the friend of Iran, because they have very different ideologies. But however, then what happened next? There was a manned P-8 aircraft and an MQ-46 drone flying over international waters, and Iran said they were over its waters, not international waters, and shot down the drone, not the manned aircraft, thank God. Iran retrieved the wreckage. Does that reinforce its claim that the drone was over its waters? I don't know. You can make your own judgment. Iran retrieved the wreckage of the drone. Then we nearly had an attack as a consequence. Very nearly had an attack on Iranian missiles bases. Or did we? I mean, certainly the president authorized such an attack, but then called the warplanes in, put them on hold, as he puts it, rather than calling them back. Whatever, the warplanes did not strike, and it would have been perhaps difficult if they had, because it might have, or perhaps would have, triggered, if Iran is to be believed with the messages it sent, it would have triggered an Iranian response against America's prime ally in the Middle East, Israel. So that's obviously a big step to take by the United States of America, with major consequences. Striking Iran, I mean. So we have then a statement. We had a Twitter exchange, quite savage Twitter exchange on the day that the poor Japanese Prime Minister was visiting Iran, the supreme leader sent out a tweet saying that he really felt that Iran could go it alone and didn't need any help. And the President of the United States sent out a tweet saying, well, we don't need to talk to Iran and we're not ready to talk to Iran. However, there has been and is a White House offer to meet Iran without condition, on condition that the Iranians prove they want to behave like a normal nation. I'm quoting there, quote, the Iranians prove they want to behave like a normal nation, close quotes. On that condition, the White House will meet Iran without condition. And an interesting development here. President Trump has made it clear that he has only one principal concern. I mean, previously he highlighted the whole issue of Iranian expansionism, Iranian hegemony in the Middle East. But subsequently, more recently, he has said that his main concern is the issue of Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. He does not want Iran to have nuclear weapons. That is his big number one breadline. And yes, so is there going to be a war? Are we going to see a war? I've been going over all this ground. We all talked about it all before. Are we going to see a war with Iran? No, we are not. We are not going to see a war with Iran. Israel does not want a war with Iran. President Netanyahu is Israel's longest serving president, and he has never initiated a war of his own volition. Not okay, yes, Gaza, helpless Gaza, but that's not the same at all. No, he hasn't initiated a major war. Longest serving Prime Minister of Israel ever in history. And he's not going to do it now. He's not going to be party to this. And it's utterly against American interests. President Trump is facing re-election. The US public, are they going to be very happy about a president that goes to war in these circumstances? I don't think so. This is my opinion. I'm just expressing my opinion. But we could have a war by accident. I remember the Gulf of Tonkin. Well, you won't remember the Gulf of Tonkin incident, but we're going back way back to when I was a young teenager, 1964. And there was a US destroyer in the Gulf of Tonkin, and it was not attacked but shadowed by three little North Vietnamese torpedo boats. Well, I fired some warning shots, and the torpedo boats, foolish fools that they were, fired back. Well, they were blown out of the water, of course. Now that incident was a catalyst to ratcheting up the Vietnam War into a major confrontation. And look at all the consequences of that. Now, I'm not comparing, well, I am comparing Iran and Vietnam in the sense that the potential parallel is exquisitely disturbing. The besieged have these little boats. You know, I mean, the great American aircraft carrier is in the Gulf of Oman, not inside the Straits of Hormuz. Why? Because the aircraft carrier, as many studies have shown, would be vulnerable to attack by multiple little boats if there were suicidal attacks. If it were in confined waters like the Arabian or Persian or whatever Gulf. So we have a situation in which we could see a repeat of the Gulf of Tonkin incident or some other misunderstanding that led accidentally to war. That's why at this time men and women of goodwill must strive for peace and must strive for open conversations between the United States and the government of Iran. Oman seems to be acting as intermediary, having taken up the baton when Japan put it down. And if that's the case, we wish the government of Oman well in their efforts. But we certainly need more than these kind of proximity talks where an intermediary runs between the two nations. We need face-to-face talks between the United States of America and Iran. I mean, we have to have them, just like North Korea and the USA, and then we can deal with all this nonsense, because it is nonsense, isn't it? It's a waste of energy, and the possible repercussions are dire for our dear Middle East. It's not appropriate that this goes on. We have to think of the future of the nations in the front line here, nations like Lebanon. It's precious, a precious time, and we want peace, not war. So God grant peace in the Middle East, and let's all work for it. Thank you.